Right, let's get started on this challenge. So what we want to do first is to just get that action bar working. So I'm going to go into the resources folder and let's right click and say new directory. Let's call the directory menu, and then on that menu right click, say new menu resource file, and I'm going to call this one main for your main activity. Now if we go into this one, we will drag in one menu item there, and let's just make sure that we've got a picture there. So I'm going to right click on the resources, say new vector asset, choose the picture there for the vector asset, which will be settings again, and say okay. Let's call it settings, say next, say finish, and that picture will be then under your drawable folder. Let's go into settings and let's change that to a white. 1 2 3 4 5 6. That's a white color then, and if you go to preview you should see the white settings wheel there. Right, so let's go into the text part of your main XML, and let's call this as the title settings. Let's go into the icon property and use settings as well. We'll give it an ID and call the ID settings as well, and then we can say show as action if there's room. Right, so this is setting up then the menu item. Let's go to the main activity and use those two methods quickly. So you're going to right click and say generate, override methods, on create options menu. We're going to need that one. All of these comments, I'm just going to delete them quickly. And then we'll also use another method there, generate override methods on options item selected method. That's the method we're going to use there. And now inside of this method we're just going to call get the menu inflator, and let's inflate this menu, and that menu is in r.menu.main. We call it main, and the second argument is to just pass in that menu. And now because we gave it the title there settings, or not the title, the ID is settings, we can directly refer to it here inside of the on options item selected. So as soon as the user select one of the items in the action bar, this will run, and we've got the item that was clicked. So we only have one item, so let's just get that item ID, and if that is then r.id.settings, we know it was the settings icon that was clicked. Right, and that is it for setting up your action bar. If we run it quickly now, this action bar should already show. Let's just quickly see. Right, so there it runs. We can see there's the icon there, that's the settings, and basically what's going to happen there is we're going to start a new activity. So we'll get back to that now. Right, so for the next part, let's go and create, I want to go into my values folder, and we're going to say a new values resource file, and let's call this arrays again, just to get that option. So you remember in our settings screen, what we want is just two options there to choose between blue or red colors. So I'm going to use a string array there, and let's call this one theme underscore options, and let's close it, and then let's add some items there. So we only have two items there. One is for, I think the first one was red, and the second one was blue. Right, so I'm going to only use one string array here because I'm going to use the values as well as what the user sees as the same value. So then it's not needed. You do not need to go and create a second array that will work with this one. Right, so just remember that the array is called theme options. Right, so let's go back and we add the XML file then, or the folder directory, call it XML, must be inside of your resources. Right click on it, say new XML resource file, and let's call this one settings or preferences. Right, say okay. Let's go into that one. It starts off with a preference screen, and let's add one category there. So we'll drag in a preference category, and then for that preference category, at least I'm able to zoom again. So let's add, for that preference category, I'm going to add a title there, change the theme, and then let's drag in a list preference there. So to basically give the user a choice of these two, red or blue. So we're going to choose the theme options there, which is red, say OK, and choose it again for the values. Right, so if you go into it, you'll see the default value. Let's make the default value red. The entries is theme options and the entry values is theme options, and let's give it a key. So the key there will be theme, or let's call this one color choices, and then the title for this one will be choose a theme color. Let's just add the summary there also for it to look a bit better. So we're going to say choose a theme color to be used throughout the application. Right, and that's our list preference, so it should look fine now. So the user is going to click here and it's going to give a list either red or blue. Now let's drag in a switch preference, that's the second one. And remember that we have a different category for that one. So let's just first drag in the category. So preference category inside of the preference screen underneath that one. And let's make the title there show or hide the button. Let's make that one a capital B. Okay, and then we can go back to design and let's drag in there a switch preference into that preference category. So there's the switch. Let's go into the text part. So the default value, we'll keep it as true there. Let's make the key something like show underscore button. And let's set the title to show button. Now let's go to design. This is how it will look. Change the theme, choose a theme color, show or hide button, show the button, or hide the button then if it's not true. Right, so now we just need an activity that can host this fragment for us. So we're going to go to new activity, create an empty activity, and let's call this one settings again. Do not generate the layout file and just say finish. Right, so let's go to the top of this new activity and we're going to extend the preference activity, and then for this preference activity, we've got this onCreate method then, and what we'll do is we're going to create our own fragment here. So we're going to say public static class my prefs fragment, and then let's have it extends a preference fragment. Right, and now inside of this class, we're going to use the onCreate method. So just right click and say generate override methods and choose that onCreate method. I'm just going to delete that part there. And then we're going to use a method called add preferences from a resource, and we want to load in this XML file that we called preferences. Right, and then as the first line underneath your super.onCreate, we will call get the fragment manager dot begin the transaction dot replace, and what we want to replace is android.r.id.content, and we want to replace it with this new fragment. So we'll say new myprefs fragment, and then at the end we will commit this. Right, so this should then work. If we go to the main activity, let's just call this one. So we can say start activity. Now we want to start this one for a result. So we'll get back to this result now. But firstly, we need an intent to start this. So I'm going to say new intent. And the intent will just go from the main activity to the settings activity. So it's setting.class. And then you will see that it needs a request code. So because it's only one activity coming back, we can just set the request code as something there. But I think the best way would be to go and say final, let's call it int, let's say something like settings activity, and let's set that to 1. So then we know that it comes back from the settings activity. So instead of saying 1 there, we will pass in settings activity, which means that we're going to start the settings activity for a specific result, and it will come back into my main activity to this method. So you're going to right click, say generate. Let me just go to override methods, and we're going to search for the on activity result method. So it's going to come back into the on activity result later on. And then we can go and check if the request code, remember this is your request code, if the request code is equal to this settings activity, then we know it came back from the settings activity. So we'll come back to this coding later on. Let's just run this quickly and see if our settings screen is actually showing. Right, let's go into settings quickly. There's the settings. If I click on the theme color, choose a theme color, either red or blue. So this is working exactly like we want to have it work. And then show or hide the button will then be that one. Okay, so now remember that the shared preferences will get saved now. If we choose red there, it will save it as red. If we choose true or false here, it will save it as true or false. So this part is done basically now. And now we can go and see if we can change these theme colors. So let's see how we can do that. So let's go into our styles XML. So go to values and go into styles, and you'll see that we've got a base application theme here. So I've given you this one on that PDF document that I gave you. So it looks something like this. So I gave you the color primary red and color primary dark red and so forth. So what we need here is to go and have a look at some primary colors or some colors that we can use with this theme. So if you open up your colors XML, you'll see that you've got a color primary dark and accent and so forth. So what we want to do here is to get at least 3 colors here for the blue theme and 3 colors for your red theme. So I'm going to go to, just open up a web page. Right, so let's go to this website, materialpalette.com, and let's choose a red theme. So I'm going to use, for the red theme, I'm going to take red and orange as the accent color. And you can see there's the dark, there's the primary, and there's the accent color. So I'm going to take the dark color there. Let's go to Android Studio, and let's call this color primary dark. So let's leave that one as the dark red color, and we're going to say color primary dark red. Right, so that's your color for the dark red. Let's go back to the website, and let's take the primary color there, go back to Android Studio. That's your primary red. I'm going to call that one primary red. Just want to make sure in my styles, yes, that's how I named them. And then for your accent color red, that will be, let's go back to the website. This is my accent color, that's the orange. Let's go back, and that's my accent color for the red theme. Now let's do exactly the same thing now, but now we do it for the blues. So I'm going to copy and paste. Instead of primary red, it's going to be blue there. Instead of dark red, it's going to be dark blue. And instead of accent red, it's going to be accent blue. Now let's go back to the website quickly, and let's just choose a blue theme. So if we choose a blue theme, let's go with indigo and maybe the light blue there, something like this. That's your dark primary color. Let's go back to Android. So your dark blue is this one. Then your primary color is that one. And your accent color is this one. And we paste it. So you can see there we've got a red theme, we've got a blue theme. And now in my styles XML, you will see that this theme is not working anymore. So what I'm going to do is to go into the manifest and set my theme there to start off with the red theme. Okay, so if I go back to styles, we can actually just remove this theme then, and this is the theme that we're going to use. Well, before I remove it, you can see that the theme, the parent is theme.appcompat light dark action bar, and it's exactly the same parent I have here. So we'll basically have the same thing, we're just using a different theme and then adding our own colors there. Now I'm going to take this theme as it is and just paste it again. So instead of saying red theme, I'm going to have this now as the blue theme. And now instead of saying color primary red there, I'm going to have primary blue, like the color we have. And then instead of dark red, we'll have dark blue. Instead of accent red, we will have accent blue. Now let's just name that red there also a blue. And now we have two different themes that we can work with. Right, so let's go to the main activity and let's just see if we can set this theme quickly. So I'm going to create a method right at the bottom, and I'm going to say public void set theme. So this theme or set theme method will help me to set the theme. And what I'm going to do here is to have a shared preferences, just to get to that shared preference that's currently saved. And we'll say, let's just call it SP equals preference manager dot get default shared preferences, pass in the get base context, and then that gets me a link to the shared preferences file that's currently being used. And now I can test in here if that shared preference dot get string. Now remember, if we look at our preferences file, this one here, the array choices that we have in this list, we declared in the array, let me just quickly open up arrays, we declared it as a string array, and it's red or blue. So if I go back to the main activity, that's why I'm using the get string there. So what's the key then for this preference? The key for this list preference, we called it color choices. So I'm going to copy that key, and that's the same key I'm going to use here to get it back. So if the color choices, and let's just give it a default value also, and remember we said the default one should be red. So I'm going to leave it at default red, and then I'm going to test for the red value. So if it is red, we want to set the theme to that red theme. So we're just going to call set theme r.style.red theme. So that's basically going to in your styles XML. So it's r.style.red theme or r.style.blue theme, setting a different theme. So the else part here will be if it's not red, then it must be blue that is selected. So then we set the theme to r.style.blue theme. Right, so let's just check and see if this is working. So remember what I told you, it's in your onCreate, but before you call set content view, let's call set theme there. So we'll set the theme before we call set content view. So let's run this quickly again. Right, and you can see the red theme is set right from the start. So I'm going to go to the settings and let's set that one to blue. And then you'll see nothing changes because we need to change it here. But if I close down this application now and open it up again, there it is. So let's open up this one. Okay, we can see it's still set to the red theme there. You can just see there. It should actually be the blue one. We'll check now why it didn't change. Okay, let's go back to the coding. The problem is in the styles XML. You can see that I called this one red theme, that one blue theme, but the parent here is still red. So we didn't change that red to blue there. So it will keep on going back to this parent and trying to make it red. So let's try and run this again. Right, so directly after this you can see because the last time we selected something it was the blue theme. So let's go back. We changed this to a red theme. Let's just make sure it's red. Yes. Now if we go back, it's still blue here. And even with my settings, it's still red. So what we're going to do now is to remove this totally from memory and then run this app again, and now it should be red again. So it is changing the theme 100%, but at this stage, we're only changing the theme on the main activity. I see there's another spelling mistake. Activity. Just make that mistake correct there. Activity. Okay, so we're only setting the theme there and not, just also change it here, and not on the other activity. So let's go to the other activity quickly, go to settings.java, and let's see what we can change here to make this also work. So what we're going to do here is to go to this settings activity, and we're going to implement, like I told you in that PDF document, we're going to implement the on shared preference change listener. Then it's going to give you an error, and you're going to hover over it or just click on it and say Alt-Enter, implement the method, and we want that on shared preference changed method. So this method will then run as soon as one of your preferences changes. So remember, when we run this, if I do this, if I go into settings and I change this, as soon as I do that, this on shared preference change method will run, and we can see which preference changed. Is it the true or false value here that changed, or was it actually the user that selected a different theme color? So in order for this to work, we need to implement the on shared preference change listener and then have that method implemented. And you can see there's the shared preference that was monitored, and that's the key that changed. So now here inside of the onCreate, let's just register this. So I'm going to say preference manager dot get default shared preferences, again calling get base context, and then on that I'm going to call register an on shared preference change listener. So the one that we want to register for my default shared preferences file will be just passing in this keyword, which means I'm registering this preference file of mine to be listened to by this settings class of mine. So this is the on shared preference change listener. So if I'm passing in this, it means this class of mine will listen for changes made to this preference file. And then as soon as there's a change made, it's going to call on shared preference changed. So let's just see this quickly in working there. So let's just print out the key. And remember, in your preferences file, the keys are color choices or show button. So let's just see if we can run this one quickly. So we're going to show a toast with the key as soon as one of those preferences was changed. Let's run it quickly. Right, so it's the blue theme again. Let's just see. If I click there, show button has changed. If I click again, show button changed again. If I click there and select one, color choices has changed. Color choices has changed. So you can see that this method is working now. So as soon as we make a change, we want to do something now in here. So what I can do then is to go and check if this key that was passed through, the key that changed, if it equals, remember what we call the color choices there. I think it's color underscore choices. There's the key. So if that key, we go back to settings, equals the color choices, we know now that we need to set the theme. So what I'm going to do here is to just call this dot recreate, which will recreate this whole settings activity for me. And what I'll do then is just before this call to super, just before the call to super there, I'm going to set the theme like I did in the main activity. So let's just try and see what we're going to do here. I'm going to go to the main activity and copy this method set theme. Go back to settings and let's add it there also for this class. So it's set theme again. And what we're going to do there is to call the set theme method just before the super.onCreate. And I think let's just to make sure we take this line and also put it before that theme so that we have a listener registered to it. Okay, so it's this one basically registers this preference file of ours to this class as the onShared preference change listener. And if something happens, it's going to go here. Then we check if the key is the color choices that was checked. We're going to recreate this activity. What will recreate do? It's going to rerun the onCreate again, register it again, set the theme first, and then replace the fragment. Let's see if this works. So I'm going to run it again. Right, so we're still at the blue theme. Let's click on settings. You can see everything is now the blue theme because we're setting the theme there. We can still change this thing. Let's go and change the theme to red. And you can see there it recreated the activity. Let's change it to blue or change it to red. It's recreating the activity, and now we can see. If we go back, this one is still blue. But if you run the app again, it will come up as red. So what should we do to also get this activity red when we click on the back button? So let's go and have a look at the main activity again. So remember that when we come back from the settings activity, we're going to go into this if statement. If the request code is settings activity, it means it came back from the settings activity. So the only thing I'm going to do here is to call this dot recreate. Let's run this quickly. So what will this dot recreate do in any case? It's going to run the onCreate method again, setting the theme before we set the content view. So let's look at it. Right, so that's a red theme again. Let's go and change the theme to blue, and then go back. You can see the theme changed to blue. Let's go back and set the theme to red. Go back, theme is red. 100% working. Right, I think so our theme setting part is working fine. If I click on blue, it's changing it to blue. I don't have a lot of RAM on this specific virtual device, and I've got my recording software also open, so it's using a lot of RAM on my computer currently. So if your phone has got more RAM, you won't even see this transition going on. Okay, so like for example the video that I gave you for the challenge. So if I click on blue there, it changes, and then if I go back, everything is blue. Right, so I'm going to stop the video here, and then we're going to carry on in the next video.